That's me. Okay. He can't be on it. Oh no, it's live. Okay. Fantastic.
Great. Okay, there we go.
You are muted, Aisha.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Thanks for joining.
There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, perfect.
Okay, perfect. Give me one.
Just the usual technical glitches.
Obligatory,
Okay.
yeah.
So hello, everyone. We have 2 minutes before we are live, but officially we can start now. We can start at 6 p.m., however you feel comfortable. Ambika and Amber, thank you so much for joining us today. So happy to see you both. I would say after a long time, last 2-3 months seems long time, right?
Yes.
So we are in conversation today with Ambika Trasi and Amber Majid. Amber Majid is a multidisciplinary visual artist. She received her MFA from Parsons, the New School for Design, in 2016 and graduated from Beacon House National University in Lahore in Pakistan in 2013. So her writing, performance, and animation engages with familiar archives to explore specifics of Pakistani state, urban, and digital infrastructure through a feminist lens. Amber and I, we met actually one of our first galas ever. Amber, if you remember, you were one of our volunteers. And I remember you mentioning that, I think you were in college still at that time. And after that, I think you went to Beirut, and then you came back, and I have been following your work and huge fan and absolutely in love with your work. Ambika Trasi is an artist, art organizer, and writer based in Brooklyn, New York. Her multidisciplinary research-based practice reveals the coloniality of power within images and sites. She's entrusted in role of memory, language, and technology play in identity making. So Ambika is currently a curatorial assistant at the Whitney Museum of the American Art, where she's co-curating the forthcoming exhibition, Salman Tour. How Will I Know? Postponed due to COVID-19, of course, and new dates to be announced soon. Previously, she was managing director and curatorial assistant at Asia Contemporary Art Week, where we had really close experience to working with Ambika, which was absolutely wonderful. I think for 4 years, right, Ambika? You were there for 4 years. As a board member of the South Asian Women's Creative Collection, SAUCY, Ambika was an exhibition manager for shows held at Queen's Museum in 2016 and Urban's Art Center 2017.
I was a part of.
Yeah. Right? And I'm super excited to be with 2 young, beautiful women who are powerhouse for our, young, as a curator, as an artist. So, and thank you so much everyone through Instagram, through Zoom joining us, and Ambika and Amber.
Thanks so much, Aisha and Atif and 12 Gates for hosting this. And it's so nice to be in conversation with you today, Amber, in a sort of public way, but to reconnect and to talk about your research-based practice through like 3 fleshed out projects of yours, one in the name of Hypersurface of the Present, Trans-Pakistan Zindabad, and Zameen.com. And because these projects are so layered and consist of multiple works, including works on paper, kinetic sculpture, multi-chapter animations, we'll have you do like short intro of each and get into an excerpt and before we get into conversation.
Yeah, sounds good. I'd also like to thank Aisha and Ambika, and it's nice to be reconnected. We connected previously as artists and colleagues, and it's nice to be able to talk about work and reflect on work at this time. So I am just going to share my screen, and I'm going to share an excerpt of my series In the Name of Hypersurface of the Present, as Ambika mentioned. And I'm going to show an excerpt. Here we go. Great. Let me know if you can hear the sound. Sound?
Yeah, great.
The new book of popular science, 100 Ways to Perform the Secrets of the Earth.
So that's a little snippet. So the series In the Name of Hypersurface of the Present is a long-term, about 2 to 3 year project that I worked on, which was looking at the nuclear nationalism of Pakistan and looking at it through kind of alternative feminist history. Pakistan is considered the first Muslim nuclear state, and in this video and larger project, which, sorry, this video and larger art project, which encompasses prints, vinyl installation in the back over here, a kinetic sculpture up here, and a multi-chapter animation. It encompasses a narrative and a script written through the canon of the patriarchal state via a fictional populist contemporary Urdu author that I came up with, subversively implicating the bodies of citizens, specifically women, as containers to perpetuate state-sanctioned notions of love, science, and nature. The narrative inverts this in the name of God rhetoric, initially used to push the Pakistani nuclear project. And these research materials are an extension of an animation series, or in a way, a prequel called Atmi Damake Wali Muhabbat, meaning the atomically explosive love. Right over here is a screenshot of one of the videos. And this is also when I'm talking about animation and archival material from state archives and family archives. This is a great example because it shows this is actually a cropped photo from a photograph of my grandfather's. And this is actually my grandfather right over here, Pirzada-e-Wahid. He was known as like an amateur photographer in Lahore, Pakistan. And a lot of my work has kind of branched out with my interaction with his material, his archive. And maybe we can dig into maybe kind of some of the concerns that Ambika and I came up with when we had like a little discussion. So looking at when I mean archive, I'm really talking about a very, branches of and varied source material, which I don't know if you can see in the excerpt of the animation. There's a lot of references to stock imagery. There's also a lot of objects. The laptop that you see is actually recreated digitally, and that is a laptop that I actually own, that my parents bought when I was a kid, which is teaching you how to read Arabic. So there are ways in which all these elements end up being part of this kind of this dispersed archive and come together in a video and interface. And so the reason why I thought about all these things was considering kind of the position of my grandfather, who was diagnosed with dementia for most of my life. And it made me think about kind of non-linear historical or non-linear histories, since a lot of his photographs or his photography was his main way of communicating, and how over the last few years of his life, he documented fragments of his daily life. And those are kind of remnants of how I am connected to him, and how I've been interested just in my art and political practice to think through. So I use that, and maybe even specifically this moment here, which is him at a photography exhibition of his, where he's gifting one of his photographs right over here to the father of the atomic project. He's Abdul Qadir Khan, a nuclear scientist who was gifted a photograph of my grandfather's. And on the photograph right over here, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but there's actually scripture in that relates to the atomic blast. So when I saw this material back in 2015 and 16, I was very interested in thinking about using this family personal moment to talk about larger historical state narratives. And this was an entry point to think about nuclear nationalism and its implications today. So, yeah.
And thinking about another entry point into your work, the presence of green is very clear, and like even that the shot of your exhibition at Rubber Factory and in the background of these of your animations. And green screen is a recurring motif in your work. If you've used it in your past, especially with like digital video works. And when I think about the green screen, I think about it as a site of potential, like infinite potential, a site of projection. And you're also, I'm interested in the way you're using it here, almost as like the digital rendering of the green screen in your videos, as a narrative tool in terms of like talking about the Pakistani state, talking about spirituality. Can you talk about how the use of green and the green screen has like evolved in your practice and the ways you're referring to it and using it in your work, particularly in the hypersurface of the present?
Right. So yes, there's a lot of fluorescent or chroma key in my work, and it is, and my usage of green screen is kind of prior to even this project, which was experimenting between the line of kind of digital desires and lived experience. So I did a lot in my earlier work. I worked a lot with green screen sets, and then like bodies, amateur performers in those sets, and doing endurance acts of any kind. So somehow looking through kind of nuclear nationalism, I found a lot of green screening or internet culture as a mechanism to disseminate state propaganda, or like that's one way, because green screens are a site for projection. So in a way they can be, you know, encompassed with anything, any kind of projection, whether it's hegemonic or not, whether it has to do with, you know, certain agendas. And so I saw a lot of that post 2016, and thinking about alternative facts and how the internet or internet culture can perpetuate certain narratives. And that you can see in history now, in our current or recent history. So in a way, I wanted to use, if I'm referring to green screen, I'm also referring to a very particular kind of green. And it's an interesting contrast to green that you would potentially see in a Pakistani flag or a representation of nationalism in any Islamic country.
Right.
So in a way, using chroma key as a representation of another kind of history or affinity, I wanted it to use it as a way to invert the absurdity of nationalism, and specifically in this project, I'm thinking of the patriarchal kind of Islamic state and how it affects, you know, citizen bodies, right? So the green, the chroma key is just a play off of that.
Yeah, and you touched on that really well, of how that it's speaking to a recent past, but also very much present today. And even in your use of stock footage, of memes, of how you're using open source material, but critiquing like the state and various systems of control virtually and within the state and surveillance. And there's a nice tension there, but it also very much is like speaking to how these the open source and like memes have been co-opted and you are being used to like uplift state propaganda, conservative movements, and kind of speaks to the performance of nationalism, the performance of diaspora, but in particular in this work, the performance of nationalism. And you're also doing that, you know, through your videos, especially through the voice of this contemporary populist or the poet that you're sort of channeling. So, you know, I'm interested in the way that writing process of yours, you're looking at all of this archival material, and then creating a really poetic narration. And that is the way that is sort of our entry point as the viewer. And how, you know, in thinking about like the relationship between poetry and nationalism, right. You also do this in other works of thinking about like seductive advertising language or tourism right. language. But can you talk about your writing in particular for this work?
Right. So I think, you know, questions of poetics, I think are really important. The way I even started this research project was not only through my grandfather's photograph. I also found an actual poem by an academic in Punjab University who also writes poetry as a hobby and somehow gets his work published in like a mainstream publishing house in Pakistan. I don't know how that can happen, but it's interesting how a lot of his, you know, biases or patriarchal biases were the meaning or how he projected love and spirituality. And that was throughout the book that I came by. And one of his poems is actually the name of my prequel series called Atbi Damake Wali Mohabbat. It's the name of one of his poems. And it was so interesting how he described a love that was so powerful and destructive as Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And I felt like those lines were really powerful, and there was something so also cruel and absurd about how a level of destruction can be so reduced and collapsed and also twisted in the name of love, which makes me think of poetry as can be used also as an empty signifier, poetry or science in the name of tools for state propaganda. And that's how that that very logic is also pushed in the name of the nuclear project. If you look at footage from the 1990s from PTV, any news coverage around it, it's, you know, in the name of God, we are the most powerful because we got this atomic power, you know, and it's really powerful of a statement to think that. So I was interested in presenting that twisted perspective, but through the voice or the tone of a male poet. And obviously the voiceover, once you go and look over the longer animation, it's my voice. So it's like, I'm in the writing process, I'm looking at fiction as a subversive political tool. Whether how I perform it is another part of the process. But I kind of think through these things of what identity or what tone or what way can I speak through this that is a perspective that I can also critique.
Yeah, and I think about like the strength of these works is I think it is especially there because you are like looking at these very specific case studies to consider how like nationalism and in other works of yours like neoliberalism like lays claim, commodifies notions like aspiration, desire, future, like movement, also like through space, through physical space, like in the city. And that is like so present in your work, Trans-Pakistan Zindabad, as well as Zameen.com. And I'm wondering if you could talk about using the case study in these works, being Beria Town and Lahore, to speak to like these larger issues in your work. There's so much to unpack, I think, in regards to like tourism, displacement, remigration, labor, gentrification. And it's like done through this really seemingly straightforward interface of like, of the almost like the tour guide voice.
Right. I'll try to summarize it. I don't want to get into it for too long. I see.
Yeah.
So Trans-Pakistan Zindabad, or also or translated as Long Live Trans-Pakistan, is a digital project. It's an animation, lecture performance, and virtual reality installation. It outlines the intersections of military state surveillance, global capital networks, and grandeur urban internationalism of a corrupt housing corporation called Beria Town, based in Pakistan. This global enterprise houses miniature and large-scale reproductions of a Sphinx, Eiffel Tower, and Taj Mahal, and is investigated through the facade of a revitalized tourism company, a company called Trans-Pakistan, which was once owned and operated by my maternal uncle, Harun Wahid Pirzada. And the company closed down in the early 2000s due to the implications of the war on terror in Pakistan. And so in the last 20 years, there has been an influx of a return migration, proving diaspora to be the gentrifiers and an important economy within the homeland. The tourism company and the concept of leisure is an intentional method to subversively analyze gentrification, community, and images of world building. So in this project as well, I use my uncle's failed tourism company, obviously with his permission. And this is an example on screen here, which is a pamphlet or an envelope that he used. This was photography. So the company was specifically for nature and trekking services. So I've been interested in revitalizing the company as a digital enterprise. So thinking through digital, augmented, and virtual reality interpretations of services. So there's two separate projects that I'm developing called iPlanet, and this is somewhat of an ad for it. iPlanet is supposed to be a walking tour augmented reality phone application that you can use while you try to enter Beria Town. Barriatown is a housing community, so there are residents there and people live there. And so this is a way to reinvestigate what it means to enter the housing community on different terms. If they're setting up, tourism as a way to have access to some of the semi-public spaces there, what does it mean when those gentrified out can re-enter using this technology? And then I have, this is another, maybe it would be helpful if I shared the animation as well. So we have a small excerpt. And I think you can get a little bit of an idea of what Barriatown also looks like for those who have never been.
The imaginary of Trafalgar Square becomes Doheen. 1. The lions guard the family's only space. They roar at onlookers outside of the heteronormative grid. They are maintained and tamed impeccably. No other fluid is required other than global capital networks. You will be punished to offer your saliva. Spitting will be punishable. Bodily fluids from within are prohibited. Only transactional droplets of labor are accepted. Polish the lions in the scorching heat so the nuclear family may glisten. As the user, if you move 15 yards forward, the roundabout can be occupied. Moving counterclockwise, step by step, moving counterclockwise against the dunya created by Behriya. However slow or fast you proceed, you continue to trace away from the national grid and urban plan. Using these calculations from the urban plan, it's possible to work out the circumference of the Earth. Round and round the roundabout. Loiter and slow down. The axis spinning the eagle does not change, only the direction of the axis. Given this information, what is the circumference of the Earth?
आप मोबाइल से पूछो. Ask the mobile. Are telecommunication systems cheap? Mobile possibilities.
That's not my word, guys. I'm super no.
Oh no. That autoplay. But yeah, I mean, it's such a mind-blowing space. I wasn't so aware of it until really entering into this project of yours, and then like reading more in depth about this site, which like within like this housing complex contains all of these like modernist monuments and like Eiffel Tower, Trafalgar Square.
Right. But it's specific about it though, right?
Yes.
It's not like, it's not exact reproduction. So the video that you just saw, there was an excerpt, and the site or the roundabout was at a Trafalgar Square, which is in the Karachi Beria town. And so the Beria town, so what we know of Trafalgar Square is like at the top of it, there's Nelson, the soldier at the top. And in this version, there's the name of God. So there's Allah in Arabic on the top. So it's a very particular kind of distorted worldview of this is the world, somehow Pakistani ideals or Islamic, neoliberalism. This is the epitome of it. This is a reproduction of it. And that can even be viewed in, they have another section in the Beria town in Lahore called the Ancient Egypt of the Islamic Republic, or the Islamic Republic of Ancient Egypt. It's like very strange terminology trying to collapse, an ancient Egypt in Pakistan, but having kind of Oriental linkage to Cairo, even though it isn't a thing there, right? So they have like sphinxes right along the architecture. So Beria town also, just to say if anyone isn't really aware, it's a corrupt kind of housing community that has acquired its lands through land grabbing and pressure. So it's an interesting site that is remade or refashioned as a kind of global / local place. So yeah, it's a very interesting place. Yeah.
In our conversation, it really, I think, came up that it was of just, yes, it is a very specific site in itself, but there's like recreations or versions of this almost everywhere, and the idea of a site sort of like promising you everything and giving you this I think like promising a kind of like optimized version of self within this site, which is really
that's
crazy.
present in like other parts of the region. So it's not just like just like also in the other project, In the Name of Hypersurface of the Present, if we're talking about like state propaganda, that and how political systems or other countries in the region deal with that, whether it's in Turkey or Beirut or in Cairo, in Egypt, those conditions are replicated in different ways, but there's an understanding of the implications of state propaganda. And that is similar to the way I'm looking at Beria town. It's also a ripple effect of a kind of gentrification that's happening in the Manassa region, in also Cairo in Egypt, and also a reproducing of these desires. The site, a friend just sent me she sent me an article about Tahrir Square, where the Arab Spring, awesome, crazy revolution in 2011, the uprising, that square is now being refashioned with sphinxes because they want tourism to increase. And it's a kind of interesting way in which protest culture is somehow being erased through kind of these motifs of in a way, a fictional past, right?
National pride.
National pride. So it's these icons have much more power. These modernist icons have power when they're in specific places and how they function.
And I wonder if you could talk about, like, because part of this is, or like Zameen.com, which is also using Beria town as like this case study to like through a VR project of like the body's role or the viewer's role or user's role, and the kind of I think you had this great like Mat, which was a game that was part of that installation of like giving you a sense that you are able to move within the site, but very like controlled movement.
Right.
And I guess like how do you, or what is the role of the viewer to you?
Actually, Amber, I want to add to that too. I was going to
Yeah.
ask about that. This trend shows that socialist ideas, protests, and people's concern are not a part of this narrative at all.
Sorry?
Oh, like I wanted to also add, like after what Ambika says, like I was going to ask about that too. Like this trend shows that socialist ideas, protests, and people's concern are not a part of this narrative at all, right? With Zameen.com.
No, that is. So so essentially, I think it'll be helpful to maybe look at an excerpt of the audio. So this over here is Zameen.com, this like 7 foot by 7 foot vinyl, which is on the floor. And over here is the Oculus system. And then over here is a monitor where you can see the space. There's another version of it available by a magazine called Precog and Virtual Dream Center. It's right over here. So I've basically, through this project, it's a VR installation and a 3D environment that basically remakes a roundabout. And a roundabout is one of the main features in Barriatown, where a lot of recreated monuments are placed, and they end up being public spaces, and a lot of domestic workers and people who actually are gentrified out of the housing community can re-enter as domestic laborers for people who live in the housing community. And that's most of the space where they can loiter and kind of be. So the question, I think, with this specific this part of the project is thinking about what is the accessibility, like where can you be present as what kind of presence can you have if you're non-resident, because there's so much surveillance on site in these places. So in a way, how can we gather, occupy, and loiter? Loitering is still considered, even in like other parts of the world, is considered a crime. You can't just hang out in some place. So essentially, Barriatown created VR views of their housing community. And now, currently, in the past year, it hasn't been accessible because they have their Flash player is expired, or like the mechanism, the interface to see it is defunct. So that became an interesting gateway to think about if we could recreate a VR experience, what would it look like? And so this is a little excerpt of a walking tour of the roundabout in the voice of Trans Pakistan.
Please exit your vehicle and walk towards the center. This is a call to residents of the interior to think of another imaginary, another kind of roundabout, another public. Taking the inside out against Barriatown, a housing corporation, leave behind speed and progress. Let us move from the mode of the residential to just residing. For location number audio, be aware of location and dislocation. Where is your route going to be used? It is a good idea to test your work. Slow down. Loiter in sync with planetary time. Activate through counterproductivity. The counterclockwise, a virtual
So this is just one view of the project. If you go to my website, you can see a documentation of someone actually using the Oculus system and walking around the environment. So the point is to literally activate your body. So when referring back to your earlier question, Ambika, about what the viewer does, in a lot of the earlier points of my work, I was looking at the body as like content. And now since, sorry, let me get back here. Since the last two projects that I presented today, I've been really thinking about how the body can be present and be a vehicle in which to talk about a lot of these concerns. And I think specifically for the Trans Pakistan project, it's important because I'm interested in thinking through like people who actually have been really affected by this gentrification, right? Like people on site. So I'm an upcoming artist in residence at Pioneer Works in New York for fall. And I mean, let's see what ends up happening, but in terms of when I'll take up the residency or not. But I've been, I'm supposed to be creating an interface, which is going to be a kind of a real interface that can be used for people in Baria Town, Lahore. Anyone can download it and then potentially enter Baria Town through this walking tour service. And they'll have, like seen on the screen here, a lot of imagery that relates to the kind of what is happening in Baria Town itself. Using those motifs and changing the narrative around that. And that's also present in this image here, which are actual signage in Baria Town that I documented. And I photoshopped them for, instead of it being Tawheed block, it's block Tawheed, and things like that. So it's really trying to activate, because like even if we're talking about activating the body in the housing community, pedestrians are not really considered, like if you have a car, the Baria Town police will not stop you. They'll stop you at a checkpoint to enter, but they won't be suspicious of you. So certain economic privileges definitely are in hand. And so if you use, I want to use Trans Pakistan as a service to kind of trick or impersonate a legitimate service, so then people can get access to the space on different terms, in a different way. If Baria Town is interested in creating that kind of tourism desire of escape, you know?
Yeah. Other questions from other viewers, Aisha? Or
That's exactly what I was going to say. Thank you so much, Amber and Ambika. So we can open our platform to our attendees and also through Instagram if anyone have questions. If not, while people are thinking, I actually wanted to ask if you can talk about any project, any upcoming future project you're working on it, and any ideas, the whole concept through navigating through COVID and moving into new normal. So what projects in pipeline? And again, I'm asking from both of you separately.
I have one question. Should I stop sharing?
Sure.
To Aisha. Should I stop sharing?
Sure. Yeah, you can stop sharing. Yeah,
okay.
If you want. Yeah. I thought you were asking that, can you share your future ideas? I was like, sure.
Go ahead, Ambika.
On my end, not a whole lot. You know, I had some potentially personal projects still kind of in the works, early stages, and doing, you know, yeah, nothing on my end too much like to talk that I can talk about. I keeping busy mostly through work.
So I also work as a museum educator at the Museum of Moving Image in Astoria. So I'm quite also busy with that. But in terms of my kind of art practice, I was supposed to have a solo show at a gallery in Chinatown called AD Gallery. Unfortunately, it's been indefinitely postponed. We're in talks of having it on site sometime in the fall. And it basically would be an extension of the Trans Pakistan project. The way I created the plan for the solo show was to create a kind of pop-up headquarters for Trans Pakistan, and to have custom like site-specific vinyl installation, and also to have an installation where I could give lecture performances. So that would be upcoming, and currently I'm thinking through ways in which thinking through the project of Trans Pakistan and thinking through what it means to use augmented reality and virtual reality in this kind of new circumstance of isolation, and how that can relate to protest culture. Maybe rethink what it means to gather and like community building in that way. So I'm thinking about that. And then also lastly, I was part of this, what I just put up before. I'm part of this virtual dream center game. So if anyone is up for it, you can definitely go to virtualdreamcenter.com. Oh, virtualdreamcenter.xyz, and you can download the game and look at all these interesting digital environments, including mine. So that's what I've been working on currently.
Okay, so we have one question. Among the pictures of Beria Town, I saw an image of Eiffel Tower. So it is complete with elevators to go up and down, not just a sculpture, but a functional tower?
Yes. So what's interesting about that, really good question. What's interesting about that is that you can, it functions as a tourist site. So you can go buy a ticket for like 5 rupees, 10 rupees. It depends on which level of the Eiffel Tower you want to go to.
Okay, wow.
Levels, and you can pay to go to the top. And what's super interesting about it is it kind of cements the imaginary of Beria Town, because even if you get to the top of it and you pay that money and you're on the top of the elevator, all you can see is beige houses. That is the entire viewpoint of the same houses. That is the world of Beria Town. It's offering you the world of Beria Town. So it's a very interesting, again, tool of ideology.
That's amazing. Yeah, whenever I go back, Beria Town's always, for me, first of all, they're too far from city, but people who live there, there is kind of, I guess, mental block that you're not inside like city, but that approach, it's like the best of best, right? And coming to that question, actually, maybe you have mentioned this already from another person, but has Trans Pakistan been shown, exhibited in Pakistan, and what has been the feedback, and have Beria Town people objected?
Yes. So
I'm interested.
Ambika and I like went over this for a bit because I went over the various stories of me getting kicked out, whether from state municipalities or in Beria town doing documentation. So the reason, one of also the major reasons why I keep referring to technologies that are like readily available, like I keep referring to the phone application, is because one of the only devices that aren't searched are mobile phones. So I entered Beria town with to document with my DSLR. That was not allowed. I was kicked out actually, and I went to their offices to get a permit. Now, the thing about all of that is once you do that, it becomes a very, because movies like television has done that where they get permits and they go to Beria town and they do filming. My issue was also researching which pockets of public space are accessible without surveillance, right? Or there's less surveillance. And those are potential really interesting places that I could host, or they could be checker points for potential, for the walking tour app that I want to design. So I am not allowed, but I would like to reemerge and use Trans Pakistan as a legitimate entity. And instead of implicating myself and my accessibility to work in Pakistan, which is always under threat because, you know, you can work with certain material and then this government can find out some way or form, because they'll be like, what are you? You're an artist? No, you're like a journalist. Why are you doing research on this stuff? Okay, leave. Like, they've done that to me many times. And it doesn't help that I'm diaspora. They'll be like, this foreigner doesn't know what she's doing. So for me, I think it's an opportunity to like circumvent and like be subversive and find another way where it connects both like the art world and very real conditions together. Because it's hard in Pakistan. I mean, other Pakistani artists can definitely say.
Of course, there are a lot of topics which you cannot talk about and a lot of things you can't do there, of course. So any questions from our attendees, from our Instagram live audience? I know like my room looks like I'm doing a high-tech project. It's like screens and phones, but it's fun. That's
many
part
platforms.
of it. Exactly, that's fun of virtual reality. So from our Zoom attendees, you all are unmute from our side. So if you have any question, any feedback, any comment, you can please feel free to just come in. But so Ambika and Amber, thank you so much. It was wonderful and much needed conversation during this time, because I'm having this problem. Like as we are going through this time, I talk to Pakistan with friends and family. They think, you have this conversation, they think it's all West propaganda, coronavirus. There's no coronavirus. And it always surprises me how that's even possible. You know, people are getting sick all over the world. So I guess it's just that buffer mentality. I don't know. And
I think that everyone who's interested in Pakistani politics or academia or history or art should definitely read the book, The New Pakistani Middle Class by Amara Maqsood, which is an amazing book which reframes that very thing you're talking about, Aisha, is that paranoia in how international politics affects, you know, Pakistan. And this distorted perspective of like, okay, like we're always under attack, whether it's from India, from the US. And it's quite interesting to hear conspiracy theories and how absurdist they are, but it comes from an entire, there's a whole infrastructure around that where this Pakistani state is feels under threat, kind of like implications of like post 9/11 and the war on terror. It's like it's a part of psychology of citizens
But Amber, it's happening here too, I must
Yeah,
say.
actually,
People who are
that's, yeah.
protesting. You know, like
It kind of goes,
right,
Go
Ambika,
ahead.
please. You're saying
Yeah,
something.
no. I was just thinking it kind of goes back to what you were talking about in terms of like memes. And like, I just think about like the WhatsApp as just like a disseminator for misinformation and chaos.
Alternative facts.
Yeah.
And you'll see, like, masks are obligatory. You are supposed to wear a mask, and people here, like, I see that because I live on a very busy road, and I see that people are without masks, and not one or two, lots of them. And you know, we can't be one of those people like, hey, wear your mask, what are you doing? You know, you cannot be that person. And eventually, probably at one point when everything, all the restrictions are over, we probably will be one, all of us will be one of those people. I was thinking I'm going to be like mask police, my work in progress, right? So
I saw that the other day in Brooklyn, actually. I was getting groceries, and on the way back, some person started yelling at other people because he was like, "You're so close to me, stop breathing on me." It was just like, why are you screaming at it? Like, this doesn't help the situation. I don't know. And then it's like the policing of it.
Vigilantism. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be quite a transition, I think.
Yeah.
And it's going to affect the way we interact with each other. Just like social norms, how we touch our own bodies, should we touch our face when we're outside, how we greet other people, or even if we feel comfortable enough to shake each other's hands anymore.
I think we all are frustrated. Not frustrated is not a right, but I think we all are anxious and confused. So we'll see how new reality unfolds. And, you know, again, New York is my favorite place. Sometimes we're having this conversation to come to see, just go there and do visits. I don't know when I will get that confidence, right? Same for you as a artist, as a curators, as a, you know, educators, going out live. When will you have that confidence? But thank you so much, both of you, and thank you all of you who joined us for this wonderful conversation. And Ambika and Amber, of course, this is not, we will be working in future, hopefully, more collaborations our way. But if you have anything you want to share before we end this conversation, please let me know. And actually, one more question came from audience. Can I read it? Okay.
Yeah,
so it says, before social media and information technology, I'm thinking back to Ojri camp disaster in Islamabad, Rawalpindi. There were so many rumors about air raid and attack on nuclear plant from multiple countries. So this under attack mentality goes way back. So
for sure. I mean, sorry?
No, I said, do you know about that incident?
I don't know about that incident, but I can definitely say that it traces back to like the making of Pakistan. That's why I keep saying, like, read that book by Mara Maqsood. It's a really interesting read where it traces back to the inception of Pakistan and the making of an identity post 9/11 in conversation with its international relations, you know? So I don't know. Someone's you sent another message?
No, I was reading. No, there's not a message. They just said thank you.
But that's really interesting of an example. I know I'm doing it through the lens of technology and like a recent past, but that's just my perspective as an artist.
These are very sad, I must say, sad incidents, sad moments, but one realized that how we're all navigating through that, and we all have different approach to it, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're good with time. And again, with your busy schedules, full-time routine, thank you. And please share any information, any future events you have. We would love to keep our audience posted, and looking forward to working with both of you again. Thank you, Ambika.
And thank you so much to 12 Gates for continuing to find ways to support artists during this time. Thank you. Yeah, and thank you, Amber, Naisha, and Atif.
Thank you. Thank you, Aisha, and thank you for everyone who came by.
Yeah, thank you all. Yeah. And every platform.
Yeah.
Multiple.
Not even follow.
Thank you. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.